Hi, Kennedy, too, by the way.
Hey,
And
nice to meet you.
and hello, everybody else. We are here with Professor Anthony Zenkus tonight, I should say. Welcome, and my guest co-host again is the wonderful and lovely Kennedy Cooper.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I was just talking before we went live about how I live in the one city in the country where I can look like this at an office job, so I do. And that was when I rudely cut the professor off.
Oh, no, it's never rude to cut me off. Otherwise, I'll just go on and on. I mean, I'm in therapy, so I'm working on it.
So,
and can I just say something? Can we at least at some point, even for a minute, talk about Kennedy's shirt tonight? Because it is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
No, really.
Kennedy gets the best compliments. I am sort of Twitter friends with Ellie Mistal, who you guys may know from MSNBC. And after our first show together, Ellie commented on the tweet of the final show,
Right,
that he really liked Kennedy's hair. And of course,
yeah.
if you've seen Ellie Mistal's hair, he's an expert.
I won't even start on the hair for Kennedy because it's just like, I need to show up and be okay, and then here I am next to him. So, but it's okay. It's all right.
Well, see, I was almost gonna wear a T-shirt tonight because I was feeling a little lazy, and then I was like, no, this Anthony Zenkus guy, he looks like he dresses up a little. Looking at your Twitter, because that's all I had to go on. Right. I was like, I better wear one of my nice shirts. But I do just like to dress up for camera anyway. I can't deny it.
Well, it's always important you can always judge people perfectly by their Twitter profiles, and I want everybody to know that.
Yes, 100%.
Anyway,
mine is pretty straightforward. I mean, honestly, if you follow me on Twitter, you probably know me pretty well, which is scary considering how many people follow me. But
yeah, Chris has got to have one of the most straightforward Twitter personalities ever in all of history. The first time I met Chris in person on camera like this, but I was like, yep, this is exactly what I expected.
and we're grateful for it. And Chris, so in my group of friends, like real people I know, friends, I just texted a few people and said, oh, I'm going to be on podcast with Eclectic Radical, and I got a few like, Chris, I love him, and people appreciate you're straightforward. What you see is what you get. You have great takes on things, so I follow you, and I learn a lot, so thank you.
I really try to use my Twitter to teach whenever I can. I think Twitter is kind of, at least until I wish it were as big as Facebook, but I think Twitter is very close to the best teaching tool we actually have right now. At least as far as little snippets of easily digestible information about important topics.
I really like that you said that. It's a very profound thing, but you're right. I go to Twitter for news first, and yeah, you learn a lot from people, and I gotta tell you, I've learned a lot from people experiencing homelessness.
Yes.
People experiencing depression and trauma. I learn because they're posting their truth, and there's really not a lot of places where you can find, actually no other place where you can really find that.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned trauma, because I know you did a TED Talk on that topic. And for those of you who want to see it, it's on YouTube. It's called Watch the Gap. But one of the things that I said, and that a couple of people got mad at me for saying, was people were really talking a lot about AOCs Trauma. And I respect AOCs Trauma, and I don't want to disrespect her trauma. But I think that there's something wrong in holding up our leaders and our relatively privileged leaders, let's be honest, and their trauma over the trauma that we're all going through every day simply because of our society.
Yeah. If I could jump off of that, I'll tell you, as a person, I mean, I do a lot of professional trainings on trauma. I teach about trauma at the universities that I teach at. I teach at Columbia and I teach at Adelphi. I'm teaching 2 courses on trauma this semester at Columbia, and the students are really interested in it. So on the one hand, I'm ecstatic that AOC had the courage to come forward and talk about her experience, not only on January 6th, with that, which I think was traumatic, hopefully for everybody, but there were some that I guess weren't upset by it, but it was a pretty upsetting thing.
It was pretty scary. Watching
Yeah.
it was, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not someone who desperately worries about the safety of Congress people. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I also, it's not my first concern. They have a bodyguard allowance and I don't. So that makes a difference. But that was scary to watch. And even afterwards, as I was thinking about it, is, in the real scheme of things, the individual Congress people were probably safer even in those moments than most of us are in our daily lives.
I think that's an important piece, and I want to jump off to it. The thing is, I remember watching it, and I was just sad. It was a sad day in many respects. I like that AOC connected her trauma from January 6th with the trauma that she had through sexual violence, and she came forward. I feel like that's so important. And I have a couple of tweets where that we need to talk about trauma. People don't understand it. But a couple of tweets I had basically said, okay, yeah, I get it. It matters. I applaud her courage, and our collective trauma needs to be discussed. It's more important, or how about this? Nobody's trauma is more important than anybody else's. Our collective trauma needs to be more prominent in the discussion. Mm-hmm. So now listen, I'm hopeful. If Ocasio-Cortez uses this as a jump-off point to talk about our collective trauma, then I will be profoundly grateful.
Definitely.
But I'm hoping it happens. I'm a little dubious on it. And I think that the reality is this. People need to understand what we're all going through right now is a profound collective trauma that will stay with us for the rest of our lives. Yeah. This is the pandemic, the fear, the fear for your health, the fear. Listen, I just lost a second family member 2 days ago, right? My uncle, my aunt died in April. In another part of the family, my uncle passed away 2 days ago from COVID, and he lived in Florida. And so that's a trauma for people, but the profound uncertainty of this moment, not just socially, but financially, is overwhelming. And I'll tell you, even little kids in families that don't understand finances, they're picking up on their parents' stress, and it's going to affect them. Yeah. And then workers, people depending on a check, we're told you're going to get $2,000 checks if the Democrats win the Senate, if Ossoff and Warnock, if you send them to Washington. And the Georgia voters did send them to Washington, and then we got gaslit. And I'm going to tell you, I worked with domestic violence victims, sexual violence victims. Gaslighting is real. What Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and I'm calling them out by name, Kamala Harris is no better, Warnock and Ossoff did was gaslight people living on the precipice. And it is not only unacceptable and inexcusable, I think it is grounds for demanding that they step down. These people are enemies of the working class. They use us for votes to get power. They play with our trauma. So my message to AOC is, thank you for coming forward. And I mean that sincerely. We need to move the conversation about trauma forward. But if you don't use this as a jumping off point to, by name, call out your president, your vice president, and those 2 Georgia senators, and Bernie Sanders,
Yeah.
I was very sad. Listen, I love Bernie, but don't lie to me about $1,400, dude. You're gaslighting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not just the financial insecurity; it's the feeling of being shit on.
Yes, because a lot of people worked really hard on that. My closest political allies are in Georgia, and way before it was even cool to talk about Warnock and Ossoff, we were on our show talking about we got to get people registered to vote for these special elections. You know, the Senate runoff in Georgia. This could change everything. It became cool to talk about it, and then it was all over. And it's just these people worked for months. So many people, so
Yes.
many activists and organizers gave thousands of hours to getting Warnock and Ossoff elected, literally doing the impossible, something people said could not be done. We cannot flip both of these Georgia Senate seats. Even the most optimistic predictors were saying we'll probably flip one, but not both. And we did it. We did the impossible, and they won't acknowledge it.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to say something though about that one, but not both, because sure, maybe on the first election, but when it became clear that there was going to be a special runoff with both of them and one other guy on the ballot and no one else, I really, really had a strong feeling they were going to both win or both lose.
Well,
because everybody who is going to turn out to vote for Ossoff is going to vote for Warnock. And everybody who turns out to vote for Warnock is going to vote for Ossoff. Nobody who votes for Warnock is going to think that David Perdue making fun of Kamala Harris's name was in any way cool.
Yeah.
And nobody who votes for Ossoff is going to want Loeffler over Warnock.
Although I guess from a comedy standpoint, we miss Loeffler because she's the gift that keeps on giving. My God. I mean, her corruption was so blatant. It
was out there in the open all the time.
She literally was the richest senator from the moment she was elected, because nobody that disgustingly wealthy has run for the Senate since the Rockefellers stopped running for office.
Maybe Dan Quayle in the 90s. I don't know.
But that was Dan Quayle. That was around the same time that Jay Rockefeller was still senator from West Virginia, despite having only ever been there to run for office.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost as if politicians now just go with me on this. I know it sounds crazy. It's almost as if politicians are grifters that are in it only for the money. I know. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I could just be rambling.
So
were you up late because you had this revelation yesterday and you couldn't sleep because you're just laying there going, "Oh my God."
No.
So I will say, and I am paraphrasing one of Kennedy's colleagues at his other podcast, which is currently on hiatus right now. But a very wise person once told me that everybody in the media is to some degree a grifter because you're selling yourself. And if that's not true of politics too, I don't know what it's true about.
Yeah. It takes a different kind of person. Hey, listen, I have some background in human behavior. I teach it. Okay. So what does that mean? I don't know. But I can tell you that these people are not like most of us. It takes a special type of narcissist. And I mean anybody. And it's funny. One of the things I really liked about Bernie was he kind of admitted it. When he talked about it, when he was running in the primary, he was like, of course I have an ego. You need to have an ego to run for president. I'm like, well, thank you for being honest. Right. But these people are cut from different cloths. And a good example is Rachel Maddow. Now, I used to follow Rachel Maddow when she was on Air America, which was a radio network many years ago.
Oh, I know. Yeah. It's horrible to say now. I was a huge Al Franken fan once.
So was I. And you know what? Well, we could talk about him if we end up talking about the Tara Reid.
Oh, I hope we do talk about him.
Yeah, and And I did like him back then, even though I knew he was more centrist than me. He was good on the radio. He listened to other viewpoints.
He was really good at calling out the worst Republican bullshit.
Yeah.
He was really, really good at saying, no, those pieces of those IOUs that W was talking about were T-bills. If they're just scraps of paper or IOUs, then America's billionaires are poor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can talk about modern monetary theory in a little bit too. But listen, so yeah, I followed Rachel Maddow. I liked her. She's, I'll give her this. She's extremely intelligent, more so than most people in the media. She just is.
Fooled me completely.
Very smart.
I will tell you why she fooled me completely. I read a series called Disinformation, which is about the stories that the media kills and doesn't run on given years. So every year they publish a new volume.
Yeah.
And it includes all these stories that nobody or almost nobody was talking about. You know who was consistently in there for talking about stories that nobody else was talking about? Rachel Maddow.
Not anymore.
I know.
Not anymore.
And that's the thing. And I remember years ago when there was an Israeli raid on an aid ship that was going to bring aid to Palestine, and I thought, oh, let me turn on MSNBC and see what their take is, and they didn't even mention it. And she didn't talk about it. But right now, here's the problem with Rachel Maddow. She is paid to lie to the top 20%, those that Democratic vote blue no matter who people, about Russia. She's, going to keep talking about Donald Trump and not talk about the pain that American people are feeling. And, she's paid $30 million a year to lie. And I'll tell you, if somebody pays me $30 million, I don't know. It's easy for me to say now that I have values, but that's a lot of money. But let me just throw this out, though. They're not talking about the pain that Americans are feeling. They're not talking about how we were lied to and gaslit by a predator president, Joe Biden, and his predator, as far as economically, vice president, Kamala Harris, and how the Democrats, they're not talking about it.
So let me talk a little bit about Kamala Harris, because this is something I don't know how many people know this, and I can't remember how many times I talked about it on the air before, so I'll just throw this out there. Kamala Harris's political career started when she ran for district attorney of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
At the time she ran for district attorney of San Francisco, the sitting district attorney was a man named Terrence Hallinan, who, as far as I know, is the only prosecutor who ever went from being a district attorney in a major city to running normal. Wow. For those who don't know, that's a marijuana legalization outfit.
I didn't know that.
Terrence Hallinan ran normal after being the district attorney of San Francisco. The reason that somebody needed someone to run against him was because while he was the district attorney of San Francisco, he had the lowest conviction rate of any prosecutor in the country. Very nearly the lowest conviction rate of any prosecutor in history since people have been keeping track of conviction rates.
That's beautiful.
So when we talk about Larry Krasner or Kim Fox or Chesa Boudin or the new guy here in Portland who I love but whose name I can never remember, Mike Schmidt. He's got the same name as a baseball player. That's why I remember Mike Schmidt. But all these guys, despite this being the age of the progressive prosecutor, none of these folks are even as progressive as Hallinan was then.
And, if you look at Harris, she was a danger to poor and working class people and black and brown people.
Well, That was what she ran on. She ran against the most progressive prosecutor that America has ever known on a openly tough on crime platform.
Yeah.
Openly pandering for the votes of white gentrifiers who would be able to feel less racist about voting for someone who was promising to lock up junkies and sex workers who they saw as all being black in their minds.
Let me throw
They
this
would
out.
feel less guilty about that because they were voting for a black woman.
So she led a prosecutor's office that was a danger to the citizens who elected her, especially black people.
Yes.
She bragged, and this is the thing that disturbs me. And I've seen the videos where she's laughing about locking people up.
Yes.
I know I've worked closely with prosecutors in New York who see themselves as tough on crime, but take no pleasure in it.
Well,
right? That's something that really stuck out.
That's sick. She has a problem. And you know what? The K Hive, whatever. But they are supporting a politician who took joy in destroying the lives of poor people, most of them black and brown. And that to me is sick. And let me throw one other thing. So my background is trauma. I was a director at 2 rape crisis centers in New York, right? And one of the things we dealt with child sexual abuse in addition to domestic violence and adult rape and sexual assault. I've worked with clergy sex abuse victims. They carry it with them for their entire lives. Kamala Harris, when prosecutor,
that's bitter.
You're back, by the way.
Yes.
When Kamala Harris was prosecutor, she ignored the clergy sex abuse victims, sided with the Catholic Church for political power, I believe. And those people were devastated. I have a friend. She's an adult. She's 50 years old. She was sexually abused by a clergy member in the Catholic Church when she was 7 and 8. Nobody did anything. She told a parent. The parents didn't do anything. I don't think they wanted to believe it, but nobody helped. So now she's dealing with it. She's getting therapy. She got a settlement from the diocese. But the bottom line is this has stayed with her whole life. Kamala Harris abandoned sex abuse victims. And then, no shock, she becomes the running mate of a man credibly accused of sexual assault, sexual harassment, inappropriate touching. And those are only the allegations that have surfaced to the public. I think from that perspective, she shouldn't be where she is. She should.
No, I think you made a great point about just the pleasure that she seems to take in this stuff. The videos of her laughing about it are some of the most disturbing content you can watch that any politician has ever made. And I just want to say, I've known 7 or 8 judges in my lifetime, especially because I've lived in a lot of small towns. And when you live in small towns, a lot of times you get to meet one of the judges here or there somewhere. And I've met a lot of, moderate Republican and moderate Democrat judges that are, serious about their jobs and, good old boys that believe in justice. I've never, that's like cop behavior. I've seen cops laugh about the sadistic shit they do. I've never seen a judge or a prosecutor or anyone in that kind of capacity laugh about that shit.
Listen, it's sociopathic behavior.
Well,
I'll call it out. That behavior is sociopathic. I don't know who she is. I can't diagnose her, but that behavior.
I'll compare it to the worst other person I can think of off the top of my head right now, who I immediately remember as a former prosecutor. I haven't heard Amy Klobuchar laugh about any of the things I've heard Kamala Harris laugh about, and she's an awful person.
I don't know. I mean, some people do enjoy having staplers thrown at their heads during the middle of the workday.
Well,
you cannot discount that.
Hey, I know people who enjoy all sorts of weird things. I live in Portland.
Oh, there you go.
But that's the thing is to the reason that Harry Reid had so many conversations with Amy Klobuchar about the stapler and binder clip throwing was that apparently the staffers were not consenting to her kink.
Right. That's the thing. You can do the kink if somebody consents,
Mhm.
but that seems to be
You have to vocalize first. You have to talk about it.
it seems to be a theme in both parties that we elevate both men and women who are have a hard time understanding the concept of consent, whether it comes to physical violence or to sexual violence. I don't know what to do about that, right? Like, here we are.
So I'll give my class analysis of that. We overwhelmingly elect privileged people. Some of them are born to privilege, and some of them are chosen for privilege. But there's not really much difference. I mean, sure, they started in a different place, but there's not a huge difference between someone who is picked out to join the ranks of the privileged, like Pete Buttigieg, or someone who was born to it, like Joe Kennedy.
Right. How is Pete Buttigieg? I'm sorry. Like, what? I'm sorry. No, I'm not. The man.
I'll speak to this actually because I was a budding religious leader in a different lifetime many years ago, and I was young, queer, alternative, and the leadership loved the idea that they could get me to say the things that they wanted to say, right? Like Pete has just completely made it clear that he will be the mouthpiece for old conservative ideas in a fresh way, and they're hungry for that right now. And there's not a lot of people willing to do it, no matter how lucrative it is. It's funny, we talked earlier about, you put 300 million in my face, but actually a lot of people have more integrity than not in this world, it turns out, even if it doesn't feel that way sometimes. And like, most people aren't willing to do what Pete is willing to do. Pete is willing to go out there and use his identity as a platform for shitty politics for whoever will take it. And anybody who was willing to do that can find success in that. But you have to be willing to sell your soul.
Well, Barney Frank was a corrupt shitheel. But he would never have embarrassed a significant other the way Pete did Chasten when he pulled that, if I could take a pill and not be gay, I would have taken it. And you can just see Chasten go.
I didn't hear that.
Oh, that was the bad one.
It was one of the two best takes like that in the whole primary. Buttigieg's moment where he said that in front of Chasten, and you could see Chasten just deflate like that. And then when Joe Biden made the speech, don't use an AR-15, use a shotgun. And you could see Shannon Watts just.
Yeah. Yeah, these are not. So here's the thing, right? These are not particularly smart people. They're not particularly talented people. But if we do a human behavior analysis, Chris, I think you're onto something. They're just willing to do this. And that is extremely disturbing, right? We don't have a government of moral people who have a connection of compassion or empathy. They're not serving because they know it's hard work and they're called to that hard work. They are there for very nefarious reasons. And I think one is the individual reason of they want to be elevated. They're in love with themselves. That's narcissism. The other is they truly believe that there are two types of people in our society. The ones that this camera is opposite. It's confusing me. The ones that deserve to be on top and the ones that do not. And they are willing to lie to the ones that do not to stay on top. And we're a failed state. We're at a breaking point. People like me, and I get trolled relentlessly, like you do too. You know, we're basically saying, all right, I might piss you off with my acerbic statements, but I'm letting you know if we don't do what we need to do right now, we're done. We're done. America, the farewell tour, right? Chris Hedges' book. Right?
Yeah,
That's not a joke. You know, I'm trying to save this. I don't know why, but I'm trying to save this marriage. You know,
well, I think
user.
I think
George,
also. Go ahead, Chris.
You go first.
Okay. I think also people get a little bit weird about like when you make very doomy predictions, a lot of times they think, oh, you want these horrible things to come true. No, I'm trying to prevent them from coming true by talking about them before they happen. That's what I'm trying to do. You know, when I predicted over and over again that Donald Trump would probably try some type of coup, even if it wasn't entirely successful or well thought out, that like, you know, people were like, why do you want that to happen? I don't. I didn't want this weird Capitol Hill shit to happen.
I consider that more of a riot or a demonstration than a coup. A coup is a serious attempt to take over the government.
I mean, Donald Trump didn't do anything seriously. We can't.
No, but I mean, but that's part of my point, but not where I'm really going.
Right.
So let's take what happened in mind. Let's say they had done what they want and they had killed both Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi. So what's next? You killed a couple people. What happens now?
Right. I mean, the government
still would have been a coup.
I don't think it was well thought through. I don't know I don't know what's going on in their heads. There were some pretty interesting characters there.
There were some very interesting characters.
I think that it looked like their end. I could be wrong, but you know, some of them were armed, which is greatly troubling. But it seemed that they were content to sit in chairs and move the podium around and just say, "Here we are."
They didn't really know what to do when they couldn't find any of the Congress people.
And I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't
agree.
want to dismiss how much worse it could have been, but what it ended up being, I think they looked at it like a bunch of kids breaking into the school and rummaging through the principal's office. That said, I don't think they're not dangerous.
I never said they weren't dangerous. They killed a cop.
Yeah. I mean, in a brutal, terrible way.
Yeah.
But the ultimate thing is, yeah, right. As far as it being a coup, did they have like a plan to take over the government? It doesn't seem that way. I'm open if somebody wants to present evidence. My thing is that, and did anybody else think it's weird that the Capitol was so? You would just assume. I would think that's got to be the hardest building or one of the hardest buildings to get into.
Well, remember,
not if you've got friends that work there.
Plus, even beyond that, remember during the protests on the Kavanaugh confirmation, people were all over Capitol Hill. They weren't stalking through the halls the way these guys were.
Well,
they never forced their way into the building.
They couldn't.
But they were all over the Capitol. Senators and senators could not leave the Capitol without being hounded. Mitch McConnell called them a mob. He said that senators were afraid for their lives because of the anti-Kavanaugh mob.
See, and this is the thing. What happened then, I'm fine with.
Yeah.
And I think it should happen in a democracy.
Yes.
But now they're going to use what happened on the 6th. I know this. You know this. Kennedy. They're going to use it as an excuse to stop dissent. And here's the thing, like, these people need to be held accountable politically for their gross negligence of duty in taking care of the American people.
I just got to say,
go ahead.
Real quick, too. We're talking about getting into the Capitol and protests at the Capitol and all this stuff. Go back and look at photos of BLM protests over the summer at the Capitol or anything like that. The Capitol steps look like a Star Wars movie. It is just lines of dudes in armor all the way up the steps. You cannot get through that. No one could get through that during those protests. Somehow, on January 6th, there's like 4 dudes on the steps. They're not even in body armor, and they're just standing there like, yeah, I mean, be gentle with the stuff.
Well, that's the whole thing, is the mayor turned down an offer of extra help. The Nancy Pelosi turned down an offer of extra help.
I didn't know that.
The chief of the Capitol Police turned down an offer of extra help. Everybody was turning down these offers of extra help.
So, it's an interesting thing because, there's a lot of talk about like, well, these were privileged people. They weren't poor and upset. But people need to understand what causes instability in government. When the government abandons the people, the cracks become bigger.
Yeah.
The fissures become massive, and factions start to turn against each other. Societies with the highest inequality have the highest social instability and the highest violence. And you cannot look at that, what happened on the 6th, without the lens of, we need to do something to prevent this from getting worse. Right?
Let's I'm going to go ahead and examine class a little here, because we don't look closely enough at class in our politics. We don't have a working class party in this country. Right. People say we have 2 capitalist parties, but it's not strictly accurate. The Democrats are the party of the professional class. They had deliberately set out to be the party of the professional class since 1972, when they decided, oh no, we've lost the working class. We need to find a new base. And so they had gone out of their way to be the party of the professional class. The Republicans are the party of what Marx would have called the petty bourgeois. Mm-hmm. The people who have just a little bit of a taste and just a little bit of security, but feel poor compared to the professional class, who they may actually be wealthier than in a real sense, but who make more money than them and are able to spend more. There's always been that jealousy between the urban professional class and more rural petty bourgeois who had more property but less free money.
I think it's a good analysis, yeah.
And the Republicans play that sort of rural and suburban petty bourgeois off against the Democrats' professional class. And really the only people who win in the end are the capitalist donors to both parties, who are just sort of enjoying the show and getting what they want, whoever wins.
Right.
And the people who get scapegoated by both the professionals and the petty bourgeois are the working class, because they're the ones who somebody else would have to lose something for them to get something. And they don't believe that anyone will ever take anything away from the billionaires. So obviously they're the ones who have to lose something if we're going to get it.
Listen, they shit on the working class. Let's talk about this. It's important. People don't realize this. Like the Democrats, what you just said, abandoned the working class in the early 70s. Not a mistake that's the same year that Joe Biden, the abomination known as Joe Biden, the rapist, the racist, the warmonger, rose to prominence.
What do you know about how Joe Biden rose to prominence?
I'm sorry?
What do you know about how he rose to prominence? Because it's an interesting story.
I don't know about the story. I know he ran basically as a Republican with the D next to his name.
So this is what's so interesting. Joe Biden became prominent in in Delaware state politics,
right?
Because he was working for the public defender's office, which you don't think of right now off the top of your head,
right?
And he was anti-segregation,
Right.
And he was an independent who did not register as a Democrat because the Delaware Democrats were pro-segregation, but was not a Republican. And he campaigned very vocally and aggressively for an anti-segregationist Republican against the segregationist Democratic mayor. And the anti-segregationist Republican won. At which point, everybody Biden knew was telling him he should run for office, but he discovered the only way that he could win for county supervisor, which was the office that people were saying he could definitely win, was if he ran as a Democrat. So he literally, after choosing not to be a Democrat for moral reasons, he suddenly chose to be a Democrat to run for office.
He doesn't have a moral compass, and that's narcissism. It's Machiavellian. And then he shifted his tune.
As a county supervisor, he helped institute busing in Delaware.
Oh, but then. And
as a senator, after running as a senator, as the "I was for busing" guy, I will protect civil rights, he turned around and co-authored the Biden-Eagleton Amendment.
Right. Oh, Senator Eagleton. So,
who was, speaking of which, it was Senator Eagleton, after the Democratic convention, knowing he was going to be McGovern's running mate, who handed the press the amnesty, acid, and abortion line that Nixon killed McGovern with during the campaign. Oh. Eagleton said nobody knows what McGovern is for except acid, amnesty, and abortion.
Yeah, that wasn't good. So let's just could we just shift a little more to Biden, because I draw a link.
Sure.
Here. We are in a collective trauma, the collective trauma of the dissolution of the middle class, the abandonment of the working class by predators and financial predators in government, and capitalism is their religion. All the Democrats point the finger like, oh, these Republicans, they're demagogues, they're, the Christian right. They have a religion. Their religion is capitalism, which has killed more people than any other religion in the history of this, of anything, right? You could look at genocide, world wars, slavery, on and on and on, right? So that's their thing. Joe Biden is a dutiful servant and a beneficiary of that system. But I want to draw a parallel between how the system damages us financially and, spiritually, socially, because we feel we don't have power. And the fact that one of the people responsible for that for the past 50 years is Joe Biden, who's now president. Oddly enough, I just can't wrap my head around the fact that he's president, but that this man also is an abusive. You see him interact with working class people. He yells at them. He points at them. He called a guy fat. And people are like, oh, he has dementia. Well, I don't know that he has dementia, but I do know this. He's a mean, uncompassionate narcissist. And let's draw a link between that and the behavior we see him exhibit toward women and children, violating sexual boundaries. What he was accused of doing to Tara Reid is full-blown, it's rape. Digital penetration with your fingers of someone's body is rape. And the words that he said to her after she froze up and he realized, and he said, come on, man, I thought you were into me. Because he thought because that's what a narcissist thinks. Like, why wouldn't you want to be with me?
Right.
Tara, I know Tara, and I've talked with her many times, but she said this publicly as well. She goes, he was old enough to be my father. I had no interest in him. And even if I did, that's not the way to ask somebody out, right? That he turned to her sternly, pointed and looked at her and said, you mean nothing. There's a relationship between that behavior and a man who just said $2,000 checks are going to go out immediately. Oh, I'm sorry. He doesn't say I'm sorry ever. It's 1,400, because what he just did to the American people is he looked us in the eyes and said, "You mean nothing to me."
Yeah.
Look,
He never says I'm sorry. He never said I'm sorry in any of his so-called famous apologies.
Yeah.
mass incarceration, the most. I mean, look, arguably, I'm sorry, Kennedy, I cut you off, but like,
No, you're good.
who's done more damage to Black communities in this country over the past few decades? Look, Trump is horrible. He gave solace to white supremacists, but Joe Biden actually did even more damage with mass incarceration.
Trump was a horrible person who's fundamentally responsible for a lot of housing discrimination in New York and New Jersey.
Absolutely.
His father even more so. But Biden has had institutional power to do really evil things to Black people as a collective that Trump has not had the opportunity to do, and
won't, hopefully, again.
Hopefully.
But yeah, here we are.
Yeah. If I could bring this all the way back around to the start of this conversation, I'd just like to say, I think this is what was important about AOC talking about her traumas. Even if she's, a person that is probably just another narcissist too on a lot of levels and is imperfect and all of these things. And she could have spoken to this in a more direct way, but I still think it's important, even if she's only hinting at it, that anyone in politics talk about the fact that there is a link between these institutional violences and these personal violences. And that's what she was doing when she drew a link between what happened on January 6th and her personal sexual assault. She said, this is a part of the same system. And now, did she go far enough into really like explaining that or like presenting that? No, of course not. But I still think it's important that she hinted at it, because this is a violence and a trauma that lots of working class people are experiencing all the time. And I think that's why so many people felt fear when they watched the images of the Capitol on January 6th. It wasn't because they were particularly worried about what was happening at the Capitol on screen, but because they were thinking about, I've seen this kind of violence in my community. Mm-hmm. I've seen these violent white supremacist predators in my community. I know that they're getting more powerful, and now look at them. And I think, again, even if she did a very maybe haphazard and not super analytical job of it, I think it's important that anyone draw attention to this invisible kind of violence that working class people, especially marginalized people, are dealing with all the time, and that most of our media and most of our politicians gaslight us about it even happening at all.
So I'm not willing to say that conversation is over. And like you, I'm glad she had it's people don't get it, because she was criticized like, oh, she's making it up and who cares? But here's the thing. It's never easy to come forward about your own history of sexual violence. It just isn't. And, but I'm going to say this conversation is not over. Let's use it as an opportunity. It's our job now to say, thank you, AOC, for talking about trauma, and let's talk about the collective trauma and criticize who's doing it, because these people have names, right? And companies have names, and let's talk about what the solution is, because there are words to describe that too. Mm-hmm. I also want to say this. I'm also disappointed that this is also a person who didn't support Tara Reade.
Yeah.
And I will never shame anybody for a lot of my friends voted for Biden. I have friends who said, I believe Tara Reade. I don't like Biden, but Trump is ... And I'm like, I get it. That makes sense. So I'm not shaming her for voting for him. But if you're going to talk about the trauma of sexual violence and not call out the elephant in the room, We just got rid of a president with 27 allegations of sexual misconduct against him, including rape of a 13-year-old girl. And the media did not do their jobs with that. They cared more about Stormy Daniels, and that was a consensual relationship. So, like, honestly, I don't give a shit about Stormy Daniels and the relationship. It doesn't matter. Salaciousness doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is Trump raped people and Trump sexually harassed people. We get rid of that one, and now we elect somebody with multiple allegations of inappropriate touching, videos showing him inappropriately touching children and violating their boundaries. I narrated a video on that went viral. It's got over 2 million views.
I know that one because basically you're right. That's grooming behavior.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
And I'll say this. I don't know if Joe Biden would ever hurt a kid. Hopefully not. But that behavior is not safe. But so, like, why? You can't ignore the fact. You can't have stood. Let me just say this. Any politician who stood up for Christine Blasey Ford, who's not standing up for Tara Reade, is a hypocrite, does not care about sexual violence, use sexual violence to consolidate power. Kavanaugh's a rapist. Well, he's an attempted rapist, which to me is just as bad. But you used that. You used Me Too. And now you've got a woman with credible accusation. Multiple witnesses have come forward on the record and said, Tara told me about this in 1994, right? Christine Blasey Ford didn't tell a living soul for 30 years, which is her right. And I believe her. Okay, AOC, let's hear it. We're not picking on her. Again, I am happy we're talking about trauma. You need to have this other conversation. There is a man in the White House who should not be there. There needs to be an investigation into the sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden and the inappropriate touching. He really shouldn't be in office. It's like
he really
has there ever been a more obvious sexual predator? This is something I asked people on Twitter a lot leading up to the election. Has there ever been a more obvious sexual predator? This man goes on television and sniffs children's hair in front of cameras.
Yes, there has, but he was not at his heyday in the television era, and that's the difference.
Right.
Errol Flynn was a notorious predator.
Who? I'm sorry.
Errol Flynn.
Oh, the actor?
And he didn't care. Yes, and he didn't care who you were. If he would go out of his way to be interested in you if he was interested in you, man or woman or whatever.
Right.
And he was very, very, very predatory. But all of that could be easily hidden in those days because you didn't have TV all the time. And when he was older, and TV was around, his health wasn't so good anymore. So he was nowhere near as active in that era, and people could forget it.
It's interesting. We're not allowed to have these conversations. When you think about it, when I called out Stacey Abrams for lying on CNN and parroting incorrect Biden campaign talking points, saying, "Oh, the Tara Reade story was investigated and it was debunked." The New York Times came out with a clarification saying, "No, we never came to a conclusion on this." In fact, the editorial board of the New York Times called for a full investigation into the Tara Reade allegations, and Joe Biden ignored it, and the DNC laughed. So,
and that debunking, oh my gosh.
Well, what they did to her character, they attacked her.
Sydney Ember was a joke on Twitter even before that story, and that story did not make it any better. I had never heard of the other writer before, but I wouldn't want to ever hear of them again now. It was just awful stuff. I mean,
I spoke to some of these people, these
it was literally, I mean, I hate to use this as a pejorative, though I don't mind so much anymore, I guess, but it's like National Enquirer level stuff in the New York Times.
This was coordinated. So let's just mention that. So there was a coordinated effort. Tara Reade story comes out full blown. And just if we could, you mind if I just take a very quick second? And so you hear people lie. Joe Biden lies all the time. He's a pathological liar. Bernie Sanders kept saying Trump is a pathological liar. He is, right? So is Joe Biden, and you're friends
Oh.
with him. So maybe talk about that.
Connie
Joe
Chung
Biden
said that in
lied.
'87.
Oh yeah, Joe Biden lied and said that her story changed. The one time he was asked by Mika, right? Mika on Morning Joe, he goes, "Well, her story changed. Story didn't change." Right? I'm an expert in trauma and sexual violence. I trained over 1,000 judges in New York State on trauma and sexual violence and domestic violence. And you know what? I can tell you this, Tara Reid's story never changed. It's very typical for a victim of rape or any kind of sexual violence to tell a little part of the story and then more of it.
I'm not even an expert, and I know that that's not a changing story.
Right, of course, right? But I throw that out there only because people are like, what do you know? And I'm like, well, here's what I know. I've worked with victims, and this is very typical.
Yeah.
She came out with her full story in March of 2020. Nobody in the press covered it for weeks. They ignored it. If this was Donald Trump, they would have reported it, and they should have. But they didn't. And then when the New York Times finally did a story on it, they did a stealth edit. They said no pattern of sexual predation, I'm paraphrasing, emerged.
Yeah.
Except for the inappropriate touching allegations. And then the Biden campaign, New York Times admitted this, Biden campaign complained, and they took that paragraph out, that sentence out. But even in that article, it's clear that multiple people have come forward to corroborate, and the Times admitted it.
Yeah.
So where's the investigation? Where is the demands? Me Too became a Democratic Party, flag that they flew.
Hey. Well, the self-appointed leader of Me Too herself said she didn't believe Tara Reid.
That's right.
Who do you mean? I'm sorry.
Oh, I say self-appointed because I mean Alyssa Milano and not anybody worth taking seriously.
Oh my God, yeah, she's hard. But listen, watch Rose McGowan.
Oh, I know.
McGowan is a fearless warrior. So here's the thing: Rose McGowan is one of the main reasons Harvey Weinstein is behind bars right now.
Yeah.
You would think that woman would be a hero. She has been demonized by the Democrats, by the trolls. Because she calls out rape culture. You don't think there's rape culture in Washington, in Hollywood? Please talk to anybody. I had a friend that was in the music industry.
So
he was in a boy band, and he was like, "Yeah, this was common, always happening."
I'm going to go ahead and call out some more people in the media now. I don't know if you guys remember this. During the presidential campaign, before the campaign really got started, when it was still a lot of stuff about senators, and all these senators were getting caught in Me Too. Al Franken kicked it off, and then more people. Several different MSNBC reporters, all women, who had all worked the Capitol Hill beat, all said the same thing. Any woman who's ever worked as a reporter on Capitol Hill knows which senators you don't want to be alone in an elevator with.
Okay.
This was the most prominent person I can think of who said that was Casey. But several other women said it too. Hallie Jackson said it. Couple other people. But so it turns out that when some stories came out, one of those senators who every woman on Capitol Hill knew not to get in an elevator with was Joe Biden.
Wow.
Why did not any of these reporters ever mention that?
They know. They all know. Why? I will give you an example. I mean,
I know they know. They said they know.
Obama chose Biden, not in the beginning, but at the end when it looked like, oh God, Bernie might win this nomination unless we get you to push Joe over the finish line. The bottom line is he's now the nominee. And well, at the time, these reporters live and die on access. They need that access. And also they like getting invited to the parties, right? Like or hosting the parties. Chuck Todd hosted a party for one of Hillary's campaign managers, Jennifer Palmieri, her birthday party. That came out in the WikiLeaks emails. So they like getting invited to the parties. They like being friendly with these people, and they want the access. But here's the thing right now, right? So Joe Biden, this should be a scandal. I mean, God, if Trump did this, it would be all over. Joe Biden will not hold a press conference, or even Jennifer Psaki, his press secretary, without getting a list of questions ahead of time. Now, why do you think that is? You don't think they're afraid of allegations coming out, more allegations? You don't wake up one day and rape one person, please. So it's that, and it's also they don't want tough questions for Joe because he cannot handle the tough questions. I mean, the guy has a hard time getting through those kinds of conversations. So there's that, but the reporters aren't getting access to him. And on the inside right now, they're not happy.
As pathological a liar as he so often is, Joe's biggest weakness is that sometimes he just tells the truth.
Well,
but his biggest saving grace, I think, in a lot of this is, there's something, if it was all reporters consciously choosing to look the other way, then eventually someone wouldn't. But a lot of it's unconscious. And this is where civility politics comes into play, because the neoliberal civility politics has warped everyone's brains into thinking, unless you have concrete, absolute proof of something, you can't accuse someone of it.
But
But I don't agree either. But I'm saying this is the way a lot of these people operate.
Unless
they had no concrete evidence against Kavanaugh, they had
unless you have concrete, absolute proof of something, you can't accuse a Democrat.
Yes.
I forgot.
Anyone or just anyone on your team, whatever team that happens to be at the time, because civility politics benefits a lot of people, a lot of different groups. But yeah, you don't accuse people on your team unless you have absolute proof. And you'll hear this in like the way people talk about things. Like if you were to go to like the HR, department of a big corporation, they'll tell you this exact same thing. They'll say, you need absolute proof of what you're telling us right now. Isn't that what they say? Most of the time they'll tell you, you need to bring us absolute proof of whatever it is. Now, better ones won't, but
HR, I just had a conversation with somebody about this today. HR doesn't represent, they're not worker advocates.
Nope.
No. Their job is to minimize risk for the company.
Yeah.
Not you.
So that's the media. Good analogy. My God, it's brilliant. Good analogy, because that's what the media's job is with the Democrats.
Well, let's talk about what HR really means, since it's been brought up now. HR is human resources. Right. So human resources is a more polite way of saying human capital stock, which pissed everybody off so much when it got said out loud.
Cattle.
Yeah.
Exactly. HR are the cowboys on the ranch, and the employees are the cattle.
Could I just so what the media did, and it's really interesting because now they're not getting access to Biden. So they were the good soldiers. They did the right thing. They ignored the story, which should have been huge. And then some reporters, Amanda Marcotte, and then the people who wrote for Politico, just went on a rampage to destroy the character of a woman who credibly accused a Democratic candidate and soon to be nominee at that time of raping her. So they went on a character assassination thing. But then there's this other insidious thing that happened is the Democratic Party, through front groups, operates troll farms. Okay? Those troll farms are active, the most famous being K-Hive. That's not an organic group of people who said, I really like Kamala Harris. That's like saying there'd be an organic group of people that really liked Pete Buttigieg. It wouldn't happen.
The three most prominent K-Hivers, Bianca, Dane Weeks, and the Ragnarok Lobster guy. They were all Hillbots first. They all worked for David Brock.
And here's the thing, like, I'm going to tell you, if somebody's getting paid and that's their way of like keeping the lights on, all right, it's not personal. I get it. But what they did was these troll groups, in sync with the media, attempted to destroy the character of a credible survivor in
Yeah.
Tara Reid and any ally that stood up for her. What they said about Rose McGowan, I've got the screenshots. What they said about Rose McGowan was disgusting.
Oh, I know.
And then I dealt with it. I wrote an article for Common Dreams. I came out. I said, "Oh, I'm an expert in trauma." I heard Tara Reid on the Katie Halper podcast.
Mm-hmm.
She's telling the truth. And then I got linked up with her after that and started talking to her, right? And then I heard more of it. Since that happened, I became inconvenient because, like, look, all right, whatever. What's in a name? I teach at a school with a prominent name, Columbia University. But when I'm tweeting and I'm out there advocating in the public, I'm doing that as a private citizen, not as a representative of my employer. These groups have been trying to get me fired from both schools that I work for months, and that level of intimidation. There's likely a link between these groups. They're not organic, and those that are in power. And when we look at that link, you realize, well, they're enemies of free speech. And the press is running interference for them. When are they going to realize this guy is not who you want him to be?
I have a friend. She's been on she was on my old show a couple of times. Kennedy knows her, Marie, who was doxxed by these trolls. It's gross.
Well, and Chris, you remember I think this was one of the first times you waded into a fight I was having online. I asked a liberal Twitch streamer who is about 4% more popular than me at the time, less popular than me now. I'm very grateful to say. And but he was someone that I had known for around a year. We had collaborated a little bit, and we had talked shop a lot as fellow creators. Yes. What are you talking about in the news this week? And all this. And he literally called me crazy. Chris, you might remember this. He literally called me crazy for saying we should be gentle in the language we use to talk about Tara Reid. That was literally all I said. And he tried to like make it out like I was this complete insane person who had no sense at all. Well, he certainly didn't seem that way when he wanted my advice as a fellow content creator for months on end. You know what I mean? And so like, where did that shift come from in this guy? And he definitely gets money from shady places. I've looked into it since then, especially. And it's like, it's very interesting because here's this person who was sort of open to talking with progressives at one time. And then suddenly, once the Tara Reid thing is out, he's a Joe Biden guy who will, just dunk anyone. Well,
you know what? They were scared. And I can tell you this, they still are. Because one of the troll accounts that's existed, and it's got my name in it and my image in it, right? Which is a copyright violation, just so y'all know. It is. That picture is, it's proprietary to me. But at any rate, but that they went quiet the first week of January. There wasn't a tweet from them for 3 weeks. And then Peter Dow tweeted out my Biden viral video about Biden's boundaries again. He had already tweeted out once before. And he tweeted it out. And he goes, we need to talk about Joe Biden's boundaries or whatever. He's groping children. It's inappropriate, which is true. And that day, within 2 hours, they started up again. So some groups that people should look at, some interesting groups. These groups exist. You can look them up online. One of the groups is Democracy Partners. So I know people who work there, and I know what they did in 2016 and 2015. This group, one of the guys who works for them was involved, and it was in Politico, in helping to elevate Trump during the primaries of 2015 and 2016. And, the article's out there. I mean, so this is not like conspiracy theory. It's Politico. They were afraid Rubio was going to get some momentum. So they followed Rubio around and tried to bird dog him and make fun of him. And they said he was a robot and they dressed up like a robot. And it was kind of funny because Rubio is kind of easy to make fun of. But the goal was to elevate Trump because they thought he'd be easy to beat. That's who this group is. Another guy was involved in going to Trump rallies and starting fistfights. Now, granted, the Trump supporters obliged and dove into the fight, but that's who they are. I wouldn't be surprised if they were connected with some of the stuff that's going on.
Oh, I'm sure.
There's some nefarious groups out there. And all they want is their man to have power.
There's a group that's just sort of hiding in plain sight on Twitter called Demcast.
Don't know.
If you go through a lot of the sort of centristy liberal types, you'll see the little hashtag Demcast in their
Demcast. Okay.
Yeah, and they're a grassroots group, one of these 501c3s or whatever.
Nonprofit. Okay.
Yes. So they can't make. So supposedly they're not in it for making money or anything like that. Except they consistently push centrist Democrats, and they have lots of accounts that do nothing but retweet other accounts, so that these centrist Democrats are constantly being promoted, and constantly being promoted with language that makes them sound a lot more progressive than they actually are. Now, because they were trying to look for people who sounded progressive, they got a few actual progressives too.
Right.
And so I know some people who were in some of their chat rooms, and as soon as people found out they were Bernie candidates and not centrist, people stopped talking to them and stopped promoting their stuff.
Well, there's a lot going on with that. So there are groups out there whose job is to destroy anybody who they think stands in the way of the capitalist Democrats, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, that whole cabal.
Mm-hmm.
And they will stop at nothing. They have no compassion, moral compass, or empathy. These are people who are dead set on power, and that's all they care about. And the methods that they employ, destroying people's lives, that's par for the course for them. And I think eventually the truth is going to come out. They're afraid right now. The fact that this troll group that's been trolling me for months started up again shows that they're scared, because if I'm not a threat, and not just me, Rose McGowan, other allies of Tara Reid, or anybody who just talks about the fact that Joe Biden is problematic on any count, $2,000 checks.
Not even something that obvious either. Look at how people have been trying to just absolutely destroy Brianna Joy Gray for the whole idea of insisting that people keep a promise about a Medicare for all vote.
Yeah. And
that's gotten really excessive.
I'm working on an article right now on Medicare for all, which I hope to, an opinion piece, which I hope to get out there, tying it to that the current system is dangerous, especially for women, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to sexual violence and sexual harassment. Because I think that's an issue that the Democrats pretend to care about. At least we can call them out on it.
I don't hear the Democrats talking about universal social housing so that you never have to worry about not being able to afford to leave your partner and move somewhere else.
No.
I'm glad that you mentioned abuse, because one of the things that I mentioned today in a completely different context, but that really matters here, is a study from the 70s that was more recently turned into a book about the sexual and relationship satisfaction of women in West Berlin versus East Berlin.
Wow.
So it turns out that women enjoy sex and relationships more if they know they can leave if someone hits them. If you never have to worry about not being able to get an apartment on your own or with another woman as a roommate, you feel more comfortable walking out on people who treat you bad in relationships.
That's
It
an
also turns out if you're a woman, you might have a little more positive feelings about spending time dating if you're in a society that acknowledges women's work, which a lot of the early communist societies of that period
Absolutely.
did.
Yes.
Acknowledge that there was all of this silent women's work being done that needed to be
Yes.
collectivized and taken on by society and not just thrust onto women.
True.
Turns out that might be good for women's social life.
It's true.
A true feminist take, and I consider feminism not just to be pro women, but it is. It's basically anti-patriarchal, so it's
Yes.
liberating to all gender expressions, as it should be. But a true feminist approach to any of the problems we have would be a complete turning upside down of this present system we have. We would have Medicare for all. We would have, as you say, Chris, guaranteed housing. People who are in jobs that are being sexually harassed, verbally harassed, exploited, can't leave because of their medical coverage being job-based, which is archaic. The rest of the world looks at us, rightly so, like there's something extremely wrong with us.
And is there anything that proves what a horrible idea it is to tie healthcare to employment than a pandemic in which businesses shut down and people get laid off?
You know, I'm going to have to get back to you on that, Chris. That's a complex point you're making, and my little brain can't process that. And plus, it's I have to watch the rebroadcast of Rachel Maddow.
Gotta see what she says.
I'm sure she won't mention the words Medicare for all. But listen, we got to put pressure on it. And I know, and I don't want to get into the whole rigmarole with the forced vote thing, but my thing is we need to talk about it. We need to say the words. I do not want to be told I'm attacking somebody by calling them out because they're an elected official. I've called out Joe Biden more than a lot of people, so I don't know that.
Hey, if I'm not afraid to call out Bernie, I'll call out everybody else too. And when Bernie, it was the first time I did something that really lost me followers, and I don't care. When Bernie did his speech where he sort of hedged on his ICE position by saying, well, no one is talking about open borders. And I was like, Bernie, we really need to open the border.
I'm talking about open borders.
So here's a weird thing. I've been to, at the northern border with Canada and the southern border near Mexico. And oddly, there's no line on the ground because there are no borders. Like there's a planet. We all live on it. And, it's just this weird kind of stuff we all assume. And my thing with Bernie, I don't get it, man. Like, you're 79 years old or 78. He's 78 or 79.
79, almost 80. He would have been 80 when he was inaugurated, so he might be 80 now.
Oh, he would, and awesome, and just very, very sharp and very productive, and got lots of energy. Survived a heart attack. But listen, Bernie, if anybody working for Bernie, if you're listening to Chris Richards, as I know you do, because it's an excellent podcast, you need to hear this. You've got nothing to lose, Bernie. Like, now's the time. Shake some shit up, Bernie. This is why people got excited. This is why over 30 to 40,000 people piled into a park in Queens, were hanging off of bridges when he gave that huge rally, because he excited them with the truth, and they thought, finally somebody hears me. Now, honor that. We're at a point right now where even if the pandemic went away, the vaccines all worked, the virus stopped mutating, and everything was fine, you've got a generation of kids now that are going to grow up with trauma for the rest of their lives because of the uncertainty in the economics, because of the social isolation, all this stuff. If you don't think we need Medicare for all more than ever, we need a nationalized, socialized health delivery system.
We don't just need Medicare for all. We also need an extensive build out of public healthcare infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Even if you leave the private stuff that we have now intact and don't nationalize it, we still need an extensive build out of public healthcare infrastructure.
Yep.
Especially mental health care. I mean, we need grief counseling in every city in America available to everyone. There's a massive flood of grief going on in this country right now, and everyone's supposed to pretend that it's just kind of not happening, even though we've all lost 2, 3, 4 people this year.
So this is the most important part of Marx. This is why so many social workers are leftists. The simple fact is that capitalism causes mental health issues. Marx was saying this in the Victorian era.
Yeah, he was brilliant. And that's what my TED Talk is about. Shameless self-promotion. It's called Watch the Gap. It's on YouTube. You can put in my last name, Watch the Gap, you'll find it. It's about the very, very clear scientific research, most of it in the past 10 years, which shows that capitalism is toxic. Literally, the pressure of inequality in a capitalist system affects the brain growth of kids, especially those in the bottom, like 30 or 40%. The evidence, I always hear this. So Democrats believe the science. Like, bullshit. You don't. You only believe it when it's convenient. They're just all a bunch of liars and gaslighters.
If Democrats really believed the science, then Jimmy Carter would have really gotten rid of nukes, like all the Republicans were saying he would, to try to scare people.
I wish the Democrats were half as threatening to the status quo as the Republicans. Every now and then I'll see a little snippet of Fox on Twitter, and they'll share it, and somebody on Fox will be saying something like, "Here's the socialist." I'm like,
scary fact.
He's not.
The Democrats would probably do better in elections if they were the frightening threat to the status quo Republicans say they are.
Right. But so because they can't do that, because their donors won't let them, and because they're part of that donor class.
Yes.
The only thing they have is fear. So like right now we're having a second impeachment of Donald Trump. Why? He's gone. He's gone. Why? Is he a bad guy? He's called it, Chris. Donald Trump. Are we allowed to curse on your?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Let me say this. As somebody with years of experience in human behavior and trauma, Donald Trump is a dick. Donald Trump has never not been a dick. I'm from New York. Donald Trump's been a dick since since he came onto the public scene in the 80s. This is not like. And first of all, why is anybody shocked that
listening to his niece, who I don't agree with politically, but seems a perfectly nice person for someone with money. He's always been a dick.
Yes.
When he attempted not to be a dick, his father was a dick to him and said, "No, you have to be a dick."
It's like some people, like Bill Maher. He's always been a dick.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, but here's the thing. Democrats can't win on the policies because they refuse to do what Chris and what Kennedy are talking about, which is embracing policies which truly will uplift society. So the only option they have is fear, which is why this impeachment is happening. And it's the great distraction, right? And the media will try to get their ratings up. I mean, CNN and MSNBC's ratings are in the toilet. They've dropped by Chris Cuomo lost half his audience. Right. And so what they're not going to talk about is climate change. The planet was on fire for most of the months of last year. They're not talking about the depression that we're in. I don't hear any of them using the words depression. We're in a depression. We're not hearing about single payer healthcare. We're not hearing any of the things we need to know. And nobody has got the ball.
Nobody even serious
stand up and call him a liar for the $2,000 check lie.
Yeah. So when when the Biden's new CDC director was telling Rachel Maddow that no, we don't need to vaccinate teachers to open
I know.
schools safely. I'm watching Rachel Maddow, and I'm just waiting for her to talk to somebody like she talked to some of the Flint people. And this never happens. And it's like, okay, no, you had that idiot who lied for Rick Snyder on and tore him a new one. Why are you not letting her have it?
Right.
But they gush over the, Joe Biden. Here's the deal. The top 20%, Rachel Maddow is in the top 1%, but the top 20%, what you call, Chris, the professional class, Thomas Frank talks about that, right?
Chris Hedges talks about the liberal class a lot, and that's the same people.
I love him. I met Chris at Occupy Wall Street, the first anniversary, and we were both kind of like running from the police that were like kind of storming us, and there was this huge rush of a crowd, and all of a sudden I'm standing against a building, and I look, and it's Chris Hedges, and I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? He's just hanging out because he walks the walk. But that 20% was offended by Trump. He made them uncomfortable. They didn't like him. And now they've kicked him out of the country club. So everything's back to normal, but it's still a country club. Most of us aren't allowed in. They still have slaves. Well,
except I have to stop you. I'm sorry, but this whole everything's back to normal. Everything's back to normal if we're asking for certain kinds of things. Otherwise, it's, oh, no, actually, everything's a disaster because of Trump. And we have to do so much work to rebuild. Have you been hearing? I've been hearing that one a lot. We have to do so much work. No, the first day that Joe Biden was in office, he signed a bunch of executive orders, undoing a bunch of Trump's executive orders. That was the most of it. That was the most of undoing the damage. Now it's time to actually start proactively making things better than they were before. If you want to take it further than that.
Promised us build back better.
That is something that he promised us.
You have to worry about a party whose PR instincts are to go with whatever company came up with the all-time worst slogan for a presidential campaign.
Well, you know who came up with that one, don't you?
No, is it Pete Buttigieg?
No. Build Back Better was the Clinton Foundation's name for their program to rebuild the Haitian economy that turned out so well.
Hey, let me.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh God. Oh, I'm having flashbacks.
That's where Joe Biden got Build Back Better.
I love people to look into Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State's history with Haiti. Yes, the Clinton Foundation did a whole bunch of horrible things in Haiti, but as Secretary of State, the U.S. State Department intervened on behalf of clothing manufacturers like Levi's and the Gap and whatever, because Haiti voted to raise their minimum wage. And the American manufacturers said, well, that will eat into our profits. And they, of course, have a hotline to the State Department. And Hillary sent her State Department emissaries down there to convince Haiti to lower the wage back down.
It's like,
and who is primarily hurt by that? Women and children working in factories. Hillary Clinton doesn't care about women. Hillary Clinton doesn't care about children. Hillary Clinton is the reason people are suffering and being exploited in Haiti.
Didn't Bill Clinton go out of his way to try to let the Haitian military murder Aristide, and it was only a matter of luck that it didn't happen?
Yeah.
I'm not shocked. But
yeah.
What are we doing? So
we're talking about all this theater. I just want to say, we've talked a little bit about like predictions and what things people should be watching for. I'll tell you, this is a prediction right now. If impeachment is still like in full swing a month from now, we're so fucked. And I think everybody needs to realize that if they manage to drag now, if you want to make the case that impeaching Donald Trump has some minor benefits and blah, blah, I'm actually willing to hear you out a little bit, but let's get it done. Let's do it and be done with it. If it's going to drag out, then what's the point? The point is just to keep everybody thinking about the bad man president that we had before and not thinking about the things that should be happening now.
Right, exactly. It's their excuse to do nothing to help us while their grift is continuing to steal from us. and deny the problems that are only going to get worse. And then they can use repression and suppression to put down any things that may bubble up, which is what they're doing. And their friends in social media can deplatform people. How many people have been deplatformed, demonetized from YouTube?
So at the same time, I don't know if either of you guys listened to them or not. I listened to them once or twice. They weren't bad. They weren't big, but they weren't bad. Excuse me. At the same time that Trump was completely deplatformed from everywhere, a little podcast called Red Scare was banned from Twitter and Facebook.
I don't know it.
They're just a little communist podcast, not even serious communist, like a DSA member who calls themselves communist.
Gotcha. But that's what they're doing. And look, we need to have a conversation about the commons. Twitter and Facebook are the commons. So don't tell me it's just a private company anymore. Without us, your company doesn't exist. And it is the commons. It's where free speech happens, especially in a pandemic. Can't go out and
plus on top of that, we're their product. So if they're going to ban everybody, how are they going to make any money selling our data?
So they're going to deplatform us. But look, what is that for? It cut us and two of us grow back. Don't worry, because there's enough people that are awake now. They're not going to tolerate the bullshit anymore. So you want to talk about predictions? Yeah, impeachment, they'll drag it out as long as possible.
Yes.
The Democrats just screwed themselves over with this $2,000 check debacle.
And they may not be done screwing themselves on that.
Oh, no. They're the gift that keeps on giving if you want to see a party implode. But my prediction based on my gut, now I mean, listen, I'm not the only one saying it, but my month is June. When I think about it, we'll be at war by June with somebody. It may not be full blown, but I think it'll be a media.
You want the likely scenario or the scary scenario?
Don't tell me scary things because it's
okay. So I'll just give you likely.
I go to bed, I'll have bad dreams. And
so the likely scenario, and they've already sort of started laying the rhetorical groundwork for it. The likely scenario is that Joe Biden talks us out of rejoining the nuclear deal with Iran and bombs them instead. That's the likely scenario. The first thing he officially did as president was order a drone attack on Somalia. That was even before the executive orders, and no one talked about that. But so that's and there it is. Pearl mentioned it. So one of the people that I follow on Twitter and who I read a lot when Truthdig was still a thing is Danny Serson, who's got really good stuff on foreign policy and military policy. And one of the things at Skeptical Vet, everybody should follow him. And one of the things that he has said several times is that the Pentagon just like purrs in its sleep, dreaming about a naval conflict with China in the South China Sea. They think they can keep it controlled and it won't escalate beyond some little naval thing. Yeah. And to be fair, China's history suggests that unless the U.S. started something, mutual assured destruction really wouldn't be likely. But that doesn't mean that a war is a good idea.
You have this way of just being so matter of fact and clear and saying, I just love the way you said that. Like, that doesn't mean a war is a good idea. Like, let's just, and I'm just on the other end and I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with them? And I'm telling you, if you voted for Joe Biden, you voted for war. You voted for a rapist. You voted for a sexual predator who touches children inappropriately on video. Go ahead. You know what? Look at the videos, right? You voted for a man who yells at workers when he yelled at immigrants. Go vote for somebody else. And he's a warmonger. And it's just, I just want to throw this out. They bombing any country is wrong.
Yeah.
But I live in New York. There's a lot of Iranian people here with family there.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's devastating. I didn't know they droned Somalia.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This is where's the anti-war left in the Democrats? They're the pro-war party.
The anti-war left. So and here's something to think about. I've had Alan Grayson on my show. Before people really got big with before Bernie really started to get big and Ro Khanna got into Congress, Alan Grayson was probably as far left as you could go in the Democratic Party. Alan Grayson had the wonderful War Makes You Poor Act, which is just the best and most honest name of any bill ever written, because war does make you poor. But
in here,
Alan Grayson endorsed Hillary Clinton over Bernie in 2016 and was still essentially drummed out of his Senate race and kept out of Congress because of his anti-war positions, despite being a good party guy who chose Hillary over Bernie like he was supposed to.
Yeah.
So what do we make of the fact that I don't even want to go there. It's insidious because the party that exists that's calling themselves the Democrats now is basically the Republican Party from the 80s.
And they're the left. And that's what's so scary about it is that we have in the 1980s people who are Democrats now were calling the Republicans fascist. And now the Democrats are indistinguishable from the Republicans in the 80s. And people are denying that they're fascist and getting very angry when people equate neoliberalism with fascism. People who call themselves anarchists get upset when you equate neoliberalism with fascism. And it's like, no. There's a good cop and a bad cop element, sure. But neoliberalism is just a way to turn the government fascist slowly and over time without the frog knowing it's boiling.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
And there's also a out of sight, out of mind aspect to a lot of the liberalism these days where like maybe we can have a government that's not so bad for us and we'll just offload that suffering onto someone else. The Republicans are fine to put all the suffering right here at home. The Democrats, they don't actually get rid of any of the suffering when they do these small acts that alleviate things slightly here. All they do is move it out of the country, overseas, into a war, into an exploitive trade deal. And so, yeah, it's these people act like, yes, our system is better because we don't see the violence and the fascism right here.
So let's look at this another way. The UK had Clement Attlee, who was definitely an actual leftist. France has actually had socialist presidents. Canada had Tommy Douglas, who was never prime minister, but who essentially gave them their national health care system. The most successful leftist politicians in the United States were FDR, Hubert Humphrey, and Lyndon B. Johnson. If that is not an indictment of the American political left, I don't know what is. Because Hubert Humphrey was disappointing at best. LBJ was a corrupt machine politician who glorified in the worst aspects of warlike foreign policy. And FDR was a literal aristocrat. And these are our leftists.
Right. I wouldn't even say FDR is a leftist. He saved capitalism.
Yeah, he saved
But
capitalism.
to have his four points that he was trying to get across, or the 7 rights and
The 4 freedoms.
Harvey K, who is a really I don't know if you I read his.
I like Harvey.
Yeah, on Thomas Paine, but he talks about this, like, the FDR wanted to be more progressive. LBJ, for all his faults, the war on poverty, with the stroke of a pen, cut U.S. poverty rates by 25%.
And
Almost
LBJ,
overnight.
for
It
all
shows-
his faults.
So my gratefulness there is it shows it can be done.
Oh yes, it does.
Choice, Nelson Mandela said.
And for all his faults, LBJ cared about domestic policy in a way that no other president before or since has.
Yeah, Nixon a little bit when it came to the environment. He did the EPA.
Well, Nixon was signing bills that the Democrats put in front of him, and he was willing to sign bills that the Democrats put in front of him, as long as he was able to do what he thought was important in foreign policy.
Right, I know.
And
but
Nixon believed,
sorry,
right or wrong, Nixon believed that he was engaged in this massive undertaking to restore some sort of peace between the great powers and end this threat of nuclear annihilation.
I want to kind of just, if I'm allowed to bring this down to what, I'm sure I don't know what time we're ending, but
well, considering your time zone, as soon as you want to, I've just been looking for the best way to get it in, so it's really up to you.
I'm not saying, oh, by the way, that's all the time I have. It's not my podcast.
That's true.
But I want to just say a couple of things that I just think. I'm worried. I'm worried about war. I'm worried about randomly, like in no particular order. I'm worried about having a rapist again who's president, what that does, the fact that he's a Democrat, to victims who are afraid to come forward. I'm worried about people living in their cars or not even being able to afford a car and sleeping on the sidewalk in February. I'm worried about the generation of kids that's going to grow up traumatized because our government abandoned us. And I think these problems are just going to get worse and not better.
They are.
There's an awakening, and we demand something. And
I see a real risk.
Not to demand things from the people that we elect. They work for us.
I see a real risk if things keep getting worse, of more people than just asylum seekers being in camps.
Yeah.
It always starts with people that nobody cares about. And lots of people are acting like we've dodged some kind of bullet by getting rid of Trump. But they haven't let anybody out of camps yet. They haven't closed any camps yet. Biden did have a ceremonial moratorium on deportations that was struck down by a judge. And as soon as it was struck down, ICE hurried to deport as many people as they possibly could.
He runs ICE. They don't, and it's very clear. Liberals, you need to hear this. Progressives who think you're progressive, you need to hear this. Nothing in that judge's decision requires Joe Biden to deport anybody.
And
it just says you can't have a moratorium on it, but you have the discretion to tell ICE just to cut the shit.
And that's the thing, is that one of two things happened here. And it almost doesn't matter which. They're both equally scary in different ways. Either ICE deliberately tried to deport as many people as they could before the president had a chance to tell them not to, on purpose, or the president chose not to stop them on purpose. Well, I don't like either option.
But ICE works for him.
Oh, well, sure. But then remember that the CIA also worked for Trump.
I want to actually take this a whole step back. this will actually add some gravity to your point. Even if I am taking a step back, I just want to say I'm probably the poorest person in this particular room right now. And as is often the case for me, I'm a trans youth who came from poverty, so that's doesn't speak well for my financial situation. And that we don't need to even put anybody in camps. The genocide of the poor is in full swing right now, and I really want people to understand this because it's happening to people that I know. And I really think people do not understand what it even looks like. The fact that suicides and overdoses went up in 2020, that is genocide of the poor.
The word doesn't get used a lot anymore. But what do we call our inner cities? Now, what did that word mean in a Nazi German context?
It meant a camp, basically.
So,
it might have been an open air camp.
They called them the Jewish ghettos, right?
Yes. Now, so if we talk about the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, we used to talk about inner city ghettos in this country. We don't use the word so much anymore, probably because of the Nazi connotation becoming more.
And also
more
it became
prevalent.
Racist connotations with it.
Yeah, because there's an anti-Semitic. Ghettos were invented because Jewish people were not allowed by the Christian authorities to live with Christians. And so it was a deliberate place to set people aside and segregate them and concentrate them even before we called them concentration camps. And the inner city, whether we call it a ghetto or not, is that same concentration of the people we don't want anywhere else.
Well, here's the thing. Nobody wants you to speak the truth. Kennedy just said, and it's so important. What they're doing is genocide.
Yes.
It's not a mistake. So let's throw this out. When you tell the truth about what's going on, the only reason I talk about my expertise when it comes to trauma that I teach at recognized universities, things like that, is because that's what that class understands. I'm no smarter than you guys, and definitely my shirt game is nowhere nearly as good as Kennedy's. So, like, when we acknowledge that, I use that to point the finger and say, I know you like academia. So let me tell you something. I'm an expert in trauma and sexual violence. I teach courses in human behavior. I've trained thousands of professionals, judges, all those people. And let me tell you something. I am not being hyperbolic when I say our nation is run by psychopaths and sociopaths. And I'm using those words in the definition that they are intended. We are run by sociopaths and psychopaths who are trying to kill us. Those that aren't actively trying to kill us are, through their negligence, allowing it to happen. Both are bad. If you're hanging on a ledge and somebody could grab your hand and they go, hold on, I have a call, they're letting you die. It doesn't matter whether they pushed you or they didn't grab you. Bottom line is that's what's happening to us.
And it's not new. Thomas Malthus was writing about it in the Victorian era. That was what made Marx so mad.
Right.
I like this guy Marx that you keep talking about. I haven't really heard about him. So I heard he wrote a book, but I
wrote a few.
Yeah. Didn't he write Das?
Well, he wrote Capital, yes.
But Das Kapital, I thought, was a computer language.
No.
You're thinking of MS Das Kapital.
No. The proof that Marxism can work is the NFL, by the way.
Oh, because of the share.
They're socialists. It's total profit sharing.
Yeah.
Also, what's more is the NFL, the teams that don't make home gate money, get more television money than the teams that make home gate money in order to keep profits as even as possible for everyone.
So let me throw this out, and I do actually have to go now because it is 11:30 Eastern time. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping that I really enjoyed this, and I'm thinking, like, even if we weren't doing a podcast, it's just nice to talk to smart people who have a heart and a soul as well as a brain.
You just explained why the format of my show is what it is.
Because I remember I wrote you before, and I'm like, so what are the questions you're going to ask?
Yes.
I'm used to that. But yeah, I get it. I'm going to watch it more. I'm sorry I haven't watched it yet, but I will because I'm a fan now. And not just because I'm on it, because that would not be the...
Well,
but
you're
anyway,
from New York. Last week was Ron Kim.
do I know Ron Kim?
He's state assemblyman from Queens. He was anti-Amazon before anybody else.
Well, just so people know, I'm on right now. I don't want to dox myself, but there are people out looking for me. But I'm easy to locate. No, but I'm on Long Island, not far from Queens at the moment. And so that's where I know the name. But I thought you meant somebody from Twitter, and I'm like, how do I know Ron Kim from Twitter? No.
Well, I follow him on Twitter. You've probably seen me retweet his stuff before.
Yes.
He tweeted. He was very active, tweeting a lot of stuff about in general during the primary. He is a big Bernie guy. Right,
and I think that. Yeah, because I remember his stuff about Amazon. Amazon's an evil company.
He was tweeting about Amazon before people were talking about it in the news.
So let's throw this out. What they want is a feudal system.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There's an old song called 16 Tons. It's an old country song.
Yes.
16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Don't
St. Peter, don't you call me. I can't go.
I sold my soul to the company store.
Yeah.
What people don't know, the company store is, so, they paid you so little that you had to, on credit, get your provisions from the store that the mining company ran.
Yeah.
So then you owed them money, so they wouldn't pay you. You would just be working off the debt so you can get your milk and your eggs and your bread.
But then you'd have more credit because you weren't getting paid.
Right. It was a feudal system, although the feudalism that existed in Europe during part of it was actually much more humane than that.
Well, and that's the whole thing, is that European peasants in the Middle Ages worked approximately 6 hours a day for slightly less than half the year, and had a remarkable amount of leisure time compared to the rest of us.
Yeah, well, what's that? So let me just, everything I've ever wanted to say in the next 30 seconds, which is a lie because I just don't. They want a feudal system. They like us to be scared. They like us to be tired. And anybody listening, if you're lucky enough to have employment, right, that helps you pay your bills, does your boss expect you to answer a dozen emails at night? I've been in that job where I had to answer a dozen emails at night. If you're not doing that, are you afraid that you're going to get fired or lose your medical coverage or anything? To live on the edge, they want us to live on the edge. It's a feudal system. Amazon's going to get bigger and bigger. They just want this whole thing where there's this, we're the down here and they're the up there. It's not just financial, it's social status. And the bottom line is, those differences are destructive on a biological level to us, right? Our gene expression is affected when we feel down here, right? It makes cancer and heart disease more likely. All of this stuff. And here's the thing. It doesn't have to be. This is a choice. And I am sick and tired of being told we need to wait, give him time. I tweeted about this. I want to throw this out. February 3rd, 2016, I organized an anti-Trump rally on Long Island to protest outside of Representative Peter King's office because of he supported Trump's Muslim immigration ban. We didn't wait. We didn't say give him time. Like, no, this guy sucks. So let's protest. And we did. We got hundreds of people down there. It took us like 5 days to organize it. That was it. Boom. Lots of people showed up, lots of media. And now the Democrats who were part of that are saying, no, give Joe Biden time. No, Joe Biden's done terrible things. We need to call out the mass incarceration state. We should be releasing prisoners. We should stop. Here's my idea. I'm just going to throw this out and then I'll stop because I'm obviously low blood sugar and I need to eat because I don't know what's happening. Here's a strategy I'm going to suggest. When they gaslight us and say, oh, it's not 2,000, it's 1,400. No more. Now we want $3,000 a month. And I'm not the only one to say that, but that's our demand. Because the Democrats drag their ass on $15 an hour wage. Fine, screw you. We want 20 minimum. We're not even going to have a conversation about 15. Done. Start saying 20.
Seattle proved how fast you can institute a $15 minimum wage if you want to.
No phase-in periods. No phase-in for Medicare for all. So you want to compromise? You want to tweak Obamacare? No. Now we were giving you the opportunity to give us Medicare for all.
Now we want the NHS.
Socialized medicine, fully socialized medicine, the end of all private hospitals, everything socialized. That's what we want.
National. You didn't like free. You didn't want to give us free college. Nationalize the Ivy League.
Yeah. And listen, I work there, but I'm an adjunct, just so you know. But there's a student strike going on.
Yeah.
People can't afford tuition. You know, I happen to work for a department that's wonderful, the social work department, really responsive to the needs of students at both Columbia and Adelphi. It's wonderful. And they're both private institutions. But listen, these decisions by these schools, they're profit-making, they're corporations. But, where the work that I do is I have these conversations with students. This is the most activist generation of college students I've come across in the dozen years I've been teaching at universities. I have hope. So as much as I think things are bad, I have hope. But we have to start making the demand and saying, we're not gonna just, daintily walk around and say, oh, please, could we have Medicare for all? Maybe a public option. Screw you. We want socialized medicine. Don't fuck with us. Don't poke the bear.
There's an old Wobbly poster that's just a list of demands. It starts with abolish the wage system and ends with bum pay for bum work for bum pay. And so, I mean, I think we should all be like the Wobblies.
And it's a fun word to say. How are you today? I'm feeling very wobbly. Me as well.
And for those who don't know, the Wobblies are the international workers of the world. They're still around. If you want to join a union, they're a good choice.
Hey, if you want to start singing the Internationale, I'm ready. I've already been branded a Russian stooge because I supported a rape victim.
So on the Russian stooge note, and this is a good phase out, and it's something that I can follow up on in the future. It's something for everybody to think about.
Ooh.
The neoconservative movement, the modern white supremacist movement within government, not outside it, but within government.
Right.
And the Democratic Socialists of America were all started by former Trotskyists.
Okay, this is so inside. For those that don't know, because people may not know who Trotsky is, Trotsky played hockey for the New York Rangers from 1974 through like 1986, I think, and won like 6 Stanley Cups.
That's Wayne Gretzky, but yeah, pretty close.
No, it's Leon Trotsky, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Red Army.
Yeah, he won a bunch of hockey games, and then he got an ice pick to the head and died. It was all ice related, see?
He organized
That's why we have to abolish ICE.
He organized the Red Army, who had a really great hockey team for years that was considered the best in the world. So in a way, he was hockey connected.
Wow.
Well played, sir.
Well played.
Very well.
Well played.
But anyway,
right.
yeah, Irving Kristol, Trotskyist. David Horowitz, who was connected with the more white supremacist elements of the Bush administration and was
I remember him. Oh my God.
And was Stephen Miller's political mentor, former Trotskyist.
You know, I never bought into the whole like they're evil, but I got to tell you something. You spend like 30 seconds to a minute listening to Stephen Miller speak and watching him, you're like, "Oh my God, like this is
it's Eichmann stuff."
Up.
And it's Eichmann stuff on two levels. It's Eichmann stuff because he's obviously so evil, and it's Eichmann stuff because he's obviously such a total boring nebbish who wouldn't be noticeable if he weren't evil.
And he's
it's
married.
That total banality of evil thing.
Every day. It's weird. He has a wife. Like that person was like, of all the people I could marry, you're the one.
No, Eichmann was also married.
Really?
Hitler found true love.
Do you think on a basic level, and I do need to go, but on a basic level, most people think they're good people. And even if they think, I know this isn't the exact right thing, but I'm doing it for the right reasons. So like Hillary Clinton destroyed Libya, but in her head, she was like, we need to do this. It's good for us. Everybody thinks they're good. Maybe Hitler did. Hitler didn't wake up saying, "Oh my God."
Hitler seriously thought he was good. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, of course he did. He was out of his mind, but and here's the thing. A little Upton Sinclairish, and in a way, we don't know that we're the evil empire too. Like we don't. We can't imagine it. We think we're free. We're not.
There's a great GIF that people keep popping up at me. It's obviously from a movie. I think it's from the recent comedy that they were showing a lot that looked like it was set in some Nazi concentration camp or something. I don't remember the details. It seemed very odd for a comedy. But it's got a guy in a Nazi in an SS uniform looking at his buddy off screen and saying, "Are we the baddies?"
I don't know. It just reminds me of like Monty Python, which is wonderful. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We don't know.
Yeah.
The horror that, the United States, the only nation to use nuclear weapons, to drop nuclear bombs. And we did it twice. Oh, by the way, and that arguably the first one wasn't necessary, but definitely that second one wasn't necessary. And, we used irradiated missiles in the last Gulf War. We drone bombed children in weddings. We assassinated American citizens abroad under Obama. So like nobody wants to really, they just want to think, I know what evil looks like, and it's got an orange comb over.
And this is one of the things that's so important about leftism to me, is that, Aristotle said that, people, there wasn't really such a thing as evil, that it was just people thinking that they were doing good, and then some of them are and some of them aren't. And that basically the only way we can really know if what we're doing has any moral value or not is to do self-criticism, something that we on the left talk about a lot, something that Republicans and Democrats are completely incapable of. And I think that really sums up a lot of what we've talked about tonight, is that we have to be willing to take a look at ourselves, look inward.
Absolutely.
That's why I criticize. That's why I engage with and criticize other leftists too, even though people call that divisive.
It's not you and I mean, we've never really gone at it, but there are a couple of times when I'm like, oh, I completely disagree with that strategy, whatever. But yeah, that's fine, because you can't get smart people together and expect them to agree on everything. That would be weird and boring.
Bizarre idea.
But I never see you act in a way where you're disrespectful, like you get disrespected. But yeah, but we do. I love what Kennedy said. I think this is a good note for me to sign off on. You guys could keep talking. You could talk about me after I go if you want. And that is, we need an intervention. We need an intervention. We have to say we're not who we're saying we are, and we could be better, and that's a good thing. Why not? I don't have all the answers, but I know what the hell's wrong.
I was really hoping the Bernie campaign was an intervention, but Bernie was just too nice.
Joe
Well,
Biden, who's been my friend for years, he's my friend.
And that's what I'm talking about. He was too nice to the people he was trying to
But
intervene
remember
with.
that last debate in March when Biden was just lying, and then you see Bernie like,
disgraceful.
wait, and he was almost thinking like, Joe, we talked about this. Like, let me come at you from the left, and if you win, you win. I win, I win. But you're now telling me that none of this happened. You look at the YouTubes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Biden takes pleasure in hurting people. So I honestly, I think that's true. I think he's a seriously damaged individual. I don't know what happened to Joe Biden, and we all know, like, I get what happened with his family, and it's tragic. It's horrible.
Well,
I can't
so-
imagine. But I think he was like it before.
He was already a senator when that happened.
Yeah.
So he was already.
But yeah, we need an intervention. So we need to revolt.
I love that.
We need to do it. And just so you know, and we may have disagreements on that. Nonviolence is important to me.
Yes.
That's me. I'm not going to criticize somebody else's way of making the world better if it's for the right things, right? Like not what they were doing at the Capitol. But I believe in nonviolent, sustained revolution. Chenoweth is the name of a woman who did studies on this. That kind of sustained stuff works, and you only need 3% of the population to gum up the system to get lasting change. And that's what I'm going to work on. Other people have to find their way, but we have to do it. We can't wait.
I think your vision of an intervention and a lot of the stuff that we talked about, all related to that tonight, is very beautiful, and I appreciate you taking the time to share it with us.
I do too. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I very much enjoyed the conversation, and I will almost certainly be inviting you back.
Ah, that's wonderful. Thank you, guys. And I really enjoyed meeting you. Like, you're not just a cool dude on Twitter. You're the real person. And now I know Kennedy. I'm going to follow you if I don't already. And what do I do? How do I sign up?
So you should have a Leave Studio.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you both for a wonderful conversation and for giving me the space to speak. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for coming on. Have a great night.
And all of you. Thank you.
And we've already gone longer than we usually do, so I'm just going to wrap up by saying that thank you for joining me again tonight, Kennedy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody who showed up in the chat and who's watched. And I will be seeing everybody next week. All take care and have a great night.